right, before we get into our next part of the Descent into Avernus write-up, I hope everyone had a happy Thanksgiving, and it is now Christmas music season, so I hope everyone enjoys Christmas music, and I'm sorry for those of you who have been forced to listen to it since, well, probably October. I think some places started playing it, but either way, here's a standard reminder. The rest of this video is going to be discussing Descent into Avernus, the module, and it's a discussion meant for DMs, so we're going to be spoiling pretty much the entire module because I'm expecting you've already read it before you get here. So stop the video here if you don't want to be spoiled, and come back when you're ready to talk about Descent into Avernus. So now, if you haven't read the module, I really think you should. If you're going to run it before you go on to it, there's a lot of better online resources than this one, but before you go out there and start reading those, I think it's imperative on you to read the module on your own and come to your own conclusions. The internet's going to poison the well, and I've said this plenty of times. While I think that the module has a lot of places it could be better, I don't think it's nearly as bad as people on the internet make it sound. We've ran it on that before, but this is just a reminder. So now, without further ado, let's go ahead and start the next section where we've been focusing on the villains in the Baldur's Gate portion of the adventure. We've touched on Krieg, a little bit on the Vanthampers, and we might go into more detail there because we kind of glossed over some of the details on them. But today I want to touch on the Cult of the Dead 3. They're woefully underused. There's a lot of simple fixes out there, such as just making them Zariel cultists so that you're not spreading your theme out too far, so that they're more connected to the Vanthampers and the overall plot. But that gets in the way of what they actually exist for in the module, which is to help build the world of Baldur's Gate. And if you make them Zariel cultists, it ruins one of the things that the module pretends is supposed to be a dramatic reveal, that is, Zariel is behind Elturel's disappearance. Look, the cover spoils that, and it's not a big surprise, and they've spoiled it in so many other places. A Magic the Gathering card, I think Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes ruins it in some ways. I think one of their online games ruins it. So even though you could kind of say this isn't a real surprise for the players, especially now that we're, 2 years out from release, the intent is there, so let's respect that and not take the cheap way out, and let's leave them as the Cult of the Dead 3. The module gives you enough about what the Cult of the Dead 3 are that I don't really need to go into it. It tells you about the gods, the names of the leaders, that the Vanthampers hired them essentially to cause chaos to undermine the Flaming Fist. And that's really it. They don't go into a whole lot more details. I think they tell you a little bit about they run this fake bathhouse. They tell you about their sewer lair. They worked with the Vanthamper kids to rob Hewn Manor to get the Shield of the Hidden Lord. That's really it. Their leaders get some names, as well as Yignath, which is just weird that this random guy gets a name, but whatever. Some names get thrown around, and if you want more specific information about who were the Dead 3, what they are in the Forgotten Realms lore, I'm not a big expert in Forgotten Realms lore, so I would recommend you either go to the wiki or any of the other places that are better than that to read up on that. But the Cult of the Dead 3 gives you world building for Baldur's Gate, and it's also there for people who've played various games in Baldur's Gate to go, hey, that's a thing I recognize, and to help make them feel, a part of this world. But the villains don't really stand out, so we need to figure out how do we make these 3 leaders stand out while not making them take up too much screen time. They're minor villains, and so unlike the Duke, we're not going to promote any of them to legendary status. She should be a legendary creature just because she's the end of the first chapter, she's important, she's driven the conflict to that point. She should be the party's first legendary challenge, but we also want these 3 villains to feel special. We need to build them up a little bit. And we're not going to go into changing their stat blocks here because that's not what this is about. We're talking about thematic stuff, narrative, but do know you shouldn't use Flennis's Fireball if you're sending people in there at level 2. So, let's take down the Dead 3. Need to be an overwhelming presence during the early part of the campaign, especially if you're going to slow down the progression through Baldur's Gate so that it's not, as the module's written, where it's the first thing the party essentially does after they meet Tarina. What this means is, while the party's wandering around Baldur's Gate, maybe have the Dead 3 ambush them, have them come across the Dead 3 ambushing someone else, have people, if you've brought the party from Elturel here, have their friends from Elturel talk about how they're being stalked. Maybe some of them just start disappearing. Let them know that there is an actual threat here from the Cult of the Dead 3, and they're not just a bunch of people sitting around in the sewers waiting for heroes to come kick down their door. What this also means is that you need to just slow down Zaj and Tarina, getting them the information to go to the bathhouse. This gives the party some things to do, and it helps get them from, I think you should get them from level 2 to 3 before they go to the Dungeon of the Dead 3. It makes some of the encounters in there a bit of a cakewalk, but it eases up some of it. Plus, that's probably their first full-length dungeon, and so that extra level of buffer of hit dice and abilities is going to let them get through that dungeon in one go. Whereas if they go in at level 2, you, the DM, are going to have this really weird moment where they might say, we need a long rest, and then you've got to make that work narratively. Sending them in at level 3, narratively, they're probably not going to want that long rest. They're going to feel a lot more capable of going through there, especially if you don't drop a fireball on them. So what do you add in? Add in a scene. This gets back to making the Vanthampers a bigger presence. If you look at my write-up that I'm going to have in the links below, I added a scene where Duke Vanthamper and Duke Portier talk at the High Hall. They give basically a presentation on, hey, this is what's going on with Baldur's Gate. Duke Ravengard's missing, and they debate over what they should be doing out in public. There's an assassination attempt by the Cult of Tiamat, and it's just an interesting scene. It gives you a little bit of background. I think another Adventure League adventure does this a little bit better, where there's an assassination attempt on Duke Portier, but I didn't want to use that for my version because this was more about trying to showcase Duke Vanthamper. But the other thing that you can do here is, by dragging out the adventure more, you now have multiple places where you could start seeding information about the Dead 3. And I think this is important because while I said you want them to know who the leaders are and you want them to feel a existing threat from the leaders of the Dead 3, note the one thing that I didn't say. You do not want the party to actually meet Kazira, Flennis, or Vaz before they fight them in the dungeon. Because these guys, you want them to be scary, you want them to feel like a threat, but narratively, they're speed bumps, right? They're not meant to be serious, lasting challenges. And they're not supposed to be like Duke Vanthamper or Zariel, who drive long stretches of the plot where they're the bad guy. They are essentially, they're monsters with a little bit of story to them. Plus, if the party fights them once and then again, their cool tricks get lost. Like, oh, we know what's coming. So, one encounter with them, but make sure you build them up. How do you build them up? You give rumors before you meet them. You have contacts get the party some information. You seed this information. The easiest way to do it is probably in Elfsong Tavern, because that's where players are going to expect to go to find rumors. So what rumors do we have about them? Well, we'll go through them in the order I gave. Kazira is a Fist of Bane. So that gives us a really good visual, right? She's heavily armored, she's got a black gauntlet, she's an imposing physical threat. Yignath exists, but for pretty much all purposes, you could just make him a nameless, faceless guy. Because we're crowded enough during Baldur's Gate with minor bad guys. Yignath, sorry, not important enough. demote him out of your bad guy list. So, how do we make Kazira more present? How do we make it clear that she's a threat? And how do we introduce her? We'll look at the scenario, because another one of the things we try to do is change the module as little as possible while giving you more and better narrative. We know Klim Jasso is captured in the lower city along with a driver and some other folks. This is a very bold raid in the middle of the city. Klim Jasso is, well, maybe not one of the biggest houses in Baldur's Gate. He's going to have some security with him. He's going to have a pretty big entourage. So this is a pretty bold strike. Lots of people are going to have seen this, and so it should be a relatively easy rumor for the party to get, because everyone's going to be talking about the armored woman with the black gauntlet slaughtering Klim's guards. And remember, we get some pretty graphic descriptions of what she did to the driver in the module. And so this is a very powerful, clearly evil person operating with seeming impunity in the lower city. So let the party know that. Have people talk about her. And remember that one of the things that she's the Fist of Bane. She's proud. She wants people to know who she is. The name Kazira is the only one of the dead three that should be readily known to the party. The party may not ever actually learn Flennis's name, and they may only learn Vaz's name from Mortlock or from some documents between him and the Van Thampers. But Kazira is the name that the people in the lower city will readily associate with the Cult of the Dead Three, because she's making these bold raids. She is announcing, I'm Kazira of Bane. The party should know that she's this scary threat. Plus, what this does is when she's the first one of the three that the party meets, it sets the stage that, if she's this powerful, this scary, and she's just the first one, well then, we need to really be careful about how we deal with number 2 and 3. Speaking of number 2, Flennis, we need to do 2 things with her. We need to establish her, but we also want to use her to give the party a pretty important clue. And we also want her threat level to be relevant, right? We don't want her to overpower the party by dropping a pair of fireballs or whatever on them. Let's cover the clue first. The bag of beans is hidden inside a body that no one in the party is going to just randomly start cutting open bodies to see if there's treasure there. Maybe if they've got detect magic up, they'll see that there's a bag of beans there. Maybe you'll be generous and be like, oh, your perception's high, you notice something weird. Feed them a clue in her little boss arena, whatever you want to call it. Put a body there that she's using to smuggle things out, and she's putting stuff there. This also lets you seed some other minor treasure, probably just gold or something. Get in there, and then later when they find another fresh body that's been clearly tampered with, someone in your party's gonna remember, because parties always remember clues that relate to finding treasure. Hey, maybe they put something in there. There you go. Now they've got a bag of beans, and good luck. They have a bag of beans now. So now we've got to figure out what's the rumor here for Flennis. Well, she's a representative of Merkel. She's also got to be prowling around the lower city and outside Baldur's Gate because she needs fresh bodies. You can either just make her a scholar, and that just makes her stand out, and so people notice when the creepy lady and her shambling bodyguards are moving about at night. And one of these stories needs to be about seeing her go into a graveyard and dig up a body and make a zombie. Right there, you're also giving the party some important information. Hey, here be zombies. Now, your average party, once they learn who Merkel is, might already assume there will be undead on the table and to prepare for that. But now your rumor is like spelling it out for the party. Be prepared for undead. Also a necromancer. Also, it lets you tell a really creepy story about maybe someone who's like at a graveyard for some illegitimate reason, maybe another grave robber who's frightened. It just lets you get a neat little story in where you get to, tell a ghost story essentially about how Flennis sneaks around reanimating the dead. Vaz is our representative of Baal. He's the leader, and he's also part of that Hewn Manor theft. So what this means is that Mortlock's going to tell you about him later, but that doesn't help, right? Because you don't encounter Mortlock until you've encountered Vaz. So what we need is for Mortlock and Vaz to have been skulking around trying to get information on Hewn Manor, maybe trying to recruit people to help with the heist. Doesn't matter. What you need is the fact that someone in either the Elfsong Tavern or somewhere else, maybe Zaj has arrested someone and he's like, hey, this guy might have information, you need to talk to him while he's in jail. And they describe their meeting with Vaz and Mortlock, and you need to remember that the description of the Death's Heads of Baal is that they are charming and disarming. So when the party is talking to the guy, like Vaz comes across very, professional, very charming, eloquent. And then, here again, you get to have fun telling a little ghost story. And when this person is about to, sign on, yeah, I'll help you out, Vaz lowers his hood, and the guy says something along the lines of, and that's when I saw that he has no face. And the problem is if your delivery on this is bad, it's going to come off as goofy. You want it to be that this was a frightening thing to see, that, the Death's Head of Baal and how Vaz is described. Plus, what this means is that later when the party fights him, in the very first round, you can have that same moment where he lowers his hood and the party realizes, oh, he's scary looking. And now, all of this doesn't really do much, right? We've set up the leaders of the Dead Three. If you've done a few encounters here and there while the party's running around doing other things, the Dead Three is now an existing threat in Baldur's Gate. It's not just that Zaj was like, oh yeah, there's an evil cult, please deal. So now, we've got one last thing I feel like we have to fix. And that's the bathhouse. It's a weird thing. The Dead Three aren't really known for being stealthy or sneaky or crafty when we're talking about their cultists, right? Like, Vaz and Flennis are really the only ones, who are noted to be intelligent or, charming and disarming. The average Baelite, Banite, and Merkelite, they should not be able to pull off this deception. And also, we don't want the party to go there, investigate, then come back at night. We don't want this yo-yo, because we've been leading them up to this point in the adventure, and when they get there, when they go there during the day to investigate, or whenever they go there to investigate, we want the adventure to kick off, right? They're there, they find out things look weird, so let's change the bathhouse so that as soon as they get there, the adventure is going to just keep rolling naturally. Plus, it's going to give us an interesting scene for roleplay purposes, and just to break up what at this point has been a very, I don't want to say paced narrative, but here we reach a point where the party is thrust into a very disconcerting scenario as a bunch of crazed cultists are trying to pretend to be, a bathhouse. So first things first, I may have missed it when I went through the module, but I don't think the bathhouse ever gets a name. So you should give it a name, because if you just keep calling it the bathhouse, it just sounds weird. I ended up calling it the Three Nymphs because there's a description in there about how there are nymphs carved along the walls, I think. We have three masseuses. It's the Cult of the Dead Three. It's a neat tie-in, easy name. Second, like I said, we want them to get there once. They go there, they go in, one and done. It's clearly weird. They investigate, fight, go into the sewer. So let's get rid of Jabaz and Carmilla as NPCs and give those names just to cultists who are trying to act like they're running a legitimate establishment. Maybe background for you, the DM, these were the names of the actual people who were here before the cultists came in and overrun the place. The Nightblades, remember though, they're very bad at restraining their desire to murder. They're not very stealthy or sneaky. That might be a slight change to how we see them described in other places, but we want that feeling where they're out of place, they're uncomfortable. But the important thing is that it also, they don't care. Like, this is, they would rather be out there doing Nightblade things. So instead of giving them all individual names, they care so little about their cover that they all just use the name of the, we'll just have them all use the name Carmilla. And so if the party talks to them, that's another clue. But they really shouldn't need to talk to see how obvious a bad cover operation this is. First, the bathhouse itself is run down. The water is disgusting. They can smell the sewer from the passageway. Like, just walking in, they should know it's not a real place. The Nightblades themselves, they can't rein in that aura of murder. Anyone doing the investigation who gets within that aura, they're gonna feel that uncomfortable chill that these Nightblades emanate. The aura is going to be leaking out of them at all times. They're going to talk in a sort of hitched, raspy voice. If for some reason one of the players pays to get a massage, it's going to be a rough, like, bruising affair. It's not comforting at all. And this is all just more stuff to help you feel like the Nightblades don't feel right. Let's give you some more visual clues, though. We're going to put them in simple uniforms that, again, are going to tie them very closely to the Cult of the Dead 3. Some combination of black dress, red handkerchief, some other way of accentuating those two colors that tie them back to the Cult of the Dead 3. They're going to carry their daggers either openly or they're going to be clumsily hidden. If anyone asks about it, again, I don't think the players will, but if they do, have an answer ready. The Nightblades are going to be obviously restraining their anger while talking about their daggers because they'd rather be stabbing than talking. Jabez, give him a human skull on his reception desk. Let's throw in a clue just in case the party doesn't rescue Mortlock that they should be thinking about the Van Thampers. So add in a ledger. But if the party investigates the ledger, one, Jabez doesn't care that they go through his desk. Again, a sign that he's not legitimate. And this is an empty ledger. He's not keeping track of payments or any of that. It's gotta feel like something is wrong here. And ultimately, the party's gonna do something that causes one of these four cultists who are not doing a very good job of hiding themselves to break character and either attack or for the party to want to push through to find something. It's going to end in a fight, but it gives the party this scene of this. It's discomforting. It's clearly something's wrong here, and it's a nice change of pace from the fight with the pirates, the assassination attempt on the Dukes. It's a nice change of pace where the party gets to interact a little bit before things go down. We're going to skip over the Dungeon of the Dead 3 itself. Other people have restatted it better than I think I ever could. And honestly, I think if you get your party up to level 3, it's not nearly as bad as a lot of people say. So, what are we going to be doing after today? We're going to be interrupting the flow to address some post-Baldur's Gate stuff because the party that I'm running through, and I'll put the YouTube for Jonas in the links because he's been keeping almost all of the videos on his channel. They're getting close to the end of the Baldur's Gate section, so I need to write and prep the Candlekeep and the flight to Candlekeep. It's not really a flight, the trip to Candlekeep. A lot of people have done a lot with that section, adding a whole lot, adding layers and layers of stuff. I feel like I almost don't like the trip to Candlekeep. I would rather you go straight from Baldur's Gate to Avernus. But again, like I said, I'm trying to change as little as possible. And there are a few neat things you can do. So I need to write that before they get there. And so before we come back, I guess maybe next week after, to talk about that section, go back, read through the module, see what the module says about the trip there. And then we can come back and talk about what I'm going to try and do, what I'm going to change and why, and how this helps make a stronger narrative. And then hopefully after that point, we'll be able to come back and continue with talking about how to better tie the Baldur's Gate portion of the adventure to the rest of it and add some context. So thank you for all of your time. This has been a little bit longer than I would have hoped, so thank you again, and I will talk to you in the future.